Knowing Yourself is a classic statement of spiritual self-inquiry, written while the author was experiencing the two main crises of his own spiritual journey: the realization of immortality and the transcendent God realization. Rather than describe these as personal events, Barry Long states very clearly the impersonal truths he discovered. In his concise, almost abrasive style, he strips away the false layers of the human condition until he reaches the timeless core of our being. This is a book for anyone intent on following the same route to truth, the way of self-knowledge. Without an experienced guide, it can be a school of hard knocks. This book has proved of great support and inspiration to its readers, and continues to be so. Whatever changes the New Age brings, a book like this speaks to each new generation, because it imparts the true knowledge of the timeless. Knowing yourself means being able to separate the true from the false in yourself, love from emotion, joy from sentiment, will from desire. Does your life seem mechanical somehow? Do you look for something greater in spite of yourself? Is what you've accepted as true really the truth? The way of self-knowledge is the discovery of what is not true or real. When the false is pointed out to us, we naturally discard it. Finally, nothing remains, and there is only the wonder of what we really are. This book is a map of the false in us and a guide to the uncharted space where truth, beauty, or God become the real experience of life. It is like a window. First, you catch sight of yourself in the false reflection of the glass. Then, you look squarely at it. Finally, you see through to the immaculate reality beyond. Barry Long was born in Australia in 1926. For him, the process of knowing yourself began at the age of 31 and continued for several years. In 1965, he experienced a mystic death, and 3 years later came the transcendental realization that marks the complete surrender of the false. His book, Knowing Yourself, is a collection of the observations he made immediately following those critical phases of self-realization. It is the seminal work of a man now regarded as a spiritual master, and one of the most significant teachers to have emerged in the West in the 20th century. This book is about you, and it is all true. It contains no theories and no arguments. But you must not believe me, for I might be a liar or a fool. No man can teach another self-knowledge. He can only lead him or her up to self-discovery, the source of truth. You must not believe anyone in the search for truth. You have to find out for yourself. But although you are on your own, help will come when it is really needed. You are either ready to discover yourself, or you are not. Ready means you have been knowingly or unknowingly practicing self-observation. The book is an experience in energy. It is not a book about knowing yourself. To read it is knowing yourself. If you are ready, it is going to disturb you. You are going to feel elevated, excited, confused, uncertain, irritated, resentful, hostile, or even physically agitated. All these are normal reactions in different personalities to the energy which is released during the process of knowing yourself. If when you finish reading the book you feel left up in the air, wondering what it was all about or what you should do next to know yourself better, then read it again and again. And gradually, or in a flash, you'll find the solution. You don't gather knowledge when you are getting to know yourself. You lose it. Many of your firmest ideas go out the window. You may feel naked, vulnerable, threatened, argumentative, angry. But if you are really looking for the truth and not for some personal vindication, you will start to discover you have access to the same source of truth as the wisest teachers who ever lived. Truth is of the moment, never of the man. And man, as I use the word, includes all of us, men, women, and children. It is a little-known fact that truth cannot be memorized. Truth has to be discovered now, from moment to moment. It is always fresh, always new, always there for the still, innocent mind that has experienced life without needing to hold on to what has gone before. Lesson 1, the robot mind. To know yourself completely is to have experienced being God and to have access at any moment to the truth this tremendous experience reveals. The experience gives the continuous certainty of being responsible for every moment of your life. That whatever happens, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, is your own will. Within this all-sustaining knowledge is the unquestionable certainty of immortality. But at the same time, it is also possible to experience responsibility for the immediate environment and finally for the entire universe, including the Earth's apparent discord of war and suffering. What I have just described is not intellectual possibility, but living experience, more intense in its reality and perception than the experience of being alive. But you must not believe me. You must realize it in yourself, know it, for it is beyond words and thinking, and it has to be experienced without recourse to drugs or insanity. Then you must live your knowledge, be your knowledge, for truth is for all men and women, not just for yourself. The first barrier to self-knowledge is that man thinks like a machine. We are for or against, or switched off, not interested. No one wants to listen, everyone wants to talk. We are a world of robot thinkers programmed by robot parents, robot teachers, and a robot society. We know little outside what someone else has taught us or said. The little else we think we know, we chum out with a monotony that sends us rushing to television, pop music, or alcohol to drown our own screeching mediocrity. Every generation of youth seems to sense it and tries to rebel. But to change the robot world, we must first change the robot patterns of our own inherited thinking. Revolution without this fundamental change is the substitution of one evil for another. Precisely what man has been doing for thousands of years. The young rebels soon put out their wrists contritely to be chained to the rest of the shuffling, mechanical throng. To be different permanently, and not be a misfit or an eccentric, you must first understand what has to be changed. This is what self-knowledge is all about. The robot in us is clearly the enemy. It is the cause of most of the worry, suffering, and unhappiness in everybody's life. It is the thing we have to understand by becoming conscious, by observing our own mind in action. People are unconscious for most of their lives, and they seldom see themselves as they are, except by accident. When they do, they usually run from the fact in horror. They sleep from birth to death, enmeshed in the robot's thinking which they imagine is themselves. You must not believe this. To believe what another says about you is unconscious, robot thinking. Nothing is true in self-discovery unless it is true in your own experience. This is the only protection against the robot levels of the mind. Truth does not need argument, agreement, theories, or beliefs. There is only one test for it, and that is to ask yourself, is the statement true or false in my experience? The ability to distinguish between true and false depends on your understanding of yourself, which in turn depends on how long and how often you are able to remain aware of yourself. Any source claiming to teach you truth or wisdom has to be tested in this way. Truth cannot be taught, but it is quickly recognized by the person ready to discover it. There are two kinds of knowledge. One is worldly knowledge, the knowledge of things outside yourself, what you learned at school, how to drive a car, your work, every activity that makes up the world's and your daily life. This practical side of living gives varying degrees of success, wealth, and fame. It produces cleverness, business acumen, lots of words, and good advice. But it cannot produce real wisdom. The other knowledge is self-knowledge, the knowledge of relationships, of fear, desire, and all the emotions that make up the self in us. The robot mind manages to mix these two worlds into an amazingly convincing confusion that leads man nowhere. Self-knowledge reveals rather startling facts. When these are faced, you begin to discover what is true and what is false in the world. If you think you know yourself, you are wrong. If you think you know what is true and false in the world, you are wrong. Neither do the other 5,000 million know, or there would be no worry. Yet everybody worries, because everybody thinks the same. If you look at your aims, you will find they represent the desire for power, position, prestige, possessions, including people, and permanence, to hold what you have. The desire for success in any of these aspects is really the desire for power. Everyone pursues them in one form or another, in the belief that their fulfillment will result in happiness or contentment. They won't, of course. And our terrible inner contradiction is that we secretly realize it. We know we are only happy for a while no matter what we attain. We are happy with a promotion which offers the prospect of more success in the future, more money now, and immediate prestige. But if we fail to be promoted next time, or have to wait too long, we will be unhappy. Real happiness and contentment must be a constant, unchanging state that does not depend on the swinging pendulum of success or failure. But everyone keeps chasing the same things because the robot mind cannot pause long enough to look for a source of happiness beyond acquisition. Am I telling you to give up your ambitions, to give up the desire for success, fame, and fortune? No. Get out there and acquire the whole world if that is what you want. Out there in the thick of it is the easiest place to discover yourself. No aim, no ambition is too high if you have it. Do not let others infect you with their deadening fear and curb your desire for glory and attainment. Get out there if you can, and be one of the few in every generation who clamber above the heads of the masses and wave their hands with a laugh shouting, "Look at me, world, I made it!" But on the way up, see that you stay conscious, aware of what you are doing. It is the conscious man or woman who finds the secret of happiness and contentment. And that, surely, is the ultimate success. To listen, to learn. Your mind has to be still. Have you ever observed that you can have only one thought in your mind at a time? If you are sitting down planning what clothes to take on holiday, your mind is on selecting them. If someone asks where you are going that afternoon, the holiday planning has to go out of your mind so it can be directed onto the afternoon program. While you are thinking, you cannot listen or absorb anything because your only avenue of awareness is occupied. Can you listen when you judge? Can you learn anything? Or do you only receive your own worn-out opinions, the product of a tiny bit of life you happen to have experienced or read about? If you are told that most of the time you are unconscious, it is the habit of the mind to immediately judge and declare, "That's silly. I am conscious. I know Tam conscious. If I were unconscious, I would not be able to do these things." But if your response is, "That may be so," you are in a state of receptivity and ready to receive what is new. The still, receptive mind begins with the state of, "I do not know, so I will listen." The busy, rigid mind begins with "I believe," or "I do not believe," with judgment and opinions. The movement each day is for your opinions to grow stronger and more numerous. This is especially true of youth as the robot thinkers gradually sew them up in a cocoon of imagined rights and wrongs and good and bad, which all proclaim yet ignore when it suits them and are insulted if told so. To break through, you have to be in a constant state of listening, for truth is discovered at the most unusual and unexpected times. You have to resist the terrible, crushing, at times almost unbearable pressure of the robot world about you that will do anything. Expose you to hate, vilification, tears, ridicule, taunts of insanity, even psychological crucifixion, to make you conform to its way of thinking, get back into line and join the dead who bury the dead. The pursuit of self-knowledge takes increasing courage. Not the kind of courage that impresses with its daring, but an inner courage that if you have it will eventually give you willpower. While the mind sees things through opinion and judgments, and it will as long as they are there, you can never see what is true. For example, the belief that God does or does not exist has to be discarded. You don't know. That is the fact. But you can find out through self-knowledge. The robot minds will try to convince you God does or does not exist, that you should believe even though it is self-evident that you cannot believe anything by an act of will. You have to know to believe, and then you do not have to believe. You know. Half the world says God exists, the other half disagrees. One of them is wrong. You might believe the wrong one. To believe either is robot thinking because neither knows. When self-knowledge reveals the answer, it will be a living fact in your own experience. At any time you wish to experience the answer, it will be there, just as you can say, "It is night," or "It is day." You will know, while the rest of the world is arguing and speculating. From this point on, you have to discard your opinions of whether another person's behavior is good or bad. You can judge no one because you will always perceive them through the slightest distortion of your judgment. Where strong emotion is involved, it is not unusual for you to see only your own judgment and not the person at all. And there is always the terrible possibility you might be wrong. The point of this is that while you are concerned with an opinion about a person, you cannot listen and might miss the truth. If someone offends you, then you can avoid him as much as possible, which you already do anyway, but without thinking about it. Judging someone to another person is this kind of thinking in words. It is the heartbeat of the robot mind. Man will give an opinion on almost anything. He does not stop to observe that most of the time he is repeating what someone else has said or written and what he has chosen to believe. He takes other people's ideas as his own or rejects them outright according to his conditioning. The first conditioning we are exposed to, irrespective of community or race, is that we are the body. Then, that we are individuals. Neither can be proved. But we are not going to draw any conclusions, for he who looks and looks long enough must find the truth. What are you? Every answer to this question comes from the robot mind, which lies like a great brick wall between us and the truth. Every answer it gives us about ourselves is but another question, a reaction bouncing back off the same superficial knowledge, an amalgam of what we already know. So we get all the answers, but no solutions. The only way we can ever get through to the truth is by finding out what we are not. We do that by looking, by observation. It is by observing we are not the objects around us that we get our sense of duality, our self-consciousness. So by observing the robot mind in action, we gradually disidentify from it and finally realize we are something else. That something, consciousness without the self, is beyond the reactions of the robot, and it is there we find the truth. The robot in us is memory. Worry, fear, every thinking reaction comes out of memory. This must be understood first. You can demonstrate this to yourself now by asking yourself a question, any question, and following what happens. You must forget any theories you have read or heard. We are not concerned with intellectual thinking or arguments here. You do not need to know psychological terms, what Freud said, and the rest of it. This process of self-discovery is scientific, and the invariable rule of science has to be applied: experiment and observe. The experiment is to ask the question. The observation is to look at yourself and see what happens. Being a science, the laws cannot vary. Any apparent variation is in you. You will have stepped off the way of facts into conclusions. The sun is either shining or it is not. You do not have to conclude. You just look. When a research scientist enters his laboratory to try to discover something new, he leaves outside all his opinions, likes, and dislikes. He sets up his experiment, begins the action, and observes the results. You have to be a scientist, observing the challenge that life throws up. The beauty of it is that the experiment is always working. You do not have to set aside time or interfere with any of your activities. The hardest part is to make sure the scientist, the observer of yourself, is there. Sometimes, as you peer into the magnificent, unexplored depths of yourself, your very being will sing at the beauty of a truth discovered, and you will exclaim with all the triumph and certainty of a scientist, "That is right." But do not imagine you can share your jubilation with everyone. Unless they are explorers of themselves, they will not understand. They may say they do, but they cannot, and you will know they do not. The rewards in this process go only to those who make the effort. That is the superb justice of it. Memory is the product of experience, and it contains the facts you use to cope with the practical side of life. But it must also contain something else. Otherwise, we would all agree on the facts, and there would be no dispute. You cannot sensibly argue about how many legs a cow has, yet our lives are spent in almost continual dispute and disagreement. People have wagered their lives on something as precarious as their memory of a date. We do it in a smaller way every time we have an argument. People declare with massive, all-excluding conviction that such and such a thing is true. "I know it is," they cry. Who knows it is? On what immovable ground do these great declarations of truth rest? On impressions. The greatest part of memory consists of impressions. These are the results of conditioning. The religion we were brought up in, our political, family, and social environment. It is the most subtle, cloying form of all experience. Impressions are the source of all our opinions and arguments. When you say God does or does not exist, or that someone is good or bad, you are drawing on impression memory. When you say you feel or just know something, you are using impressions. It is unscientific to say you feel something. It really means you have not made the effort to find out the fact. When you next reply, "I don't know" to a question, observe the state of no thought, the absence of busy reference to memory, to conditioning, and impressions. You are like a photographic plate exposed in a dark room, absolutely still yet perfectly poised to receive the light, the new. Lesson 2, the fact. You stopped believing in fairy stories when you found out that magic wands were not a fact of life in your experience. But in the days when you listened to them, you were not so sure. As a child, you did not have sufficient life experience to prove them false. Children do not listen to fairy tales for entertainment or escape. They live them and believe them as though they were life itself. The developing mind is so devised that before reading and writing occurred, even before the advent of language, it apprehended all experience in living. With language occurred the first corruption, the first lies, and the first fairy tales. So children continue to believe such things are true until life itself proves them to be false. You can make children believe anything, even that you are magical and wise, but your pose is doomed because life will instruct them by experience that you have deceived them and are not wise, and eventually they will not listen to you or consult you. Later, having failed as grown-ups to find wisdom in themselves, they will pretend to their own children that they are wise, with the same tragic results. Self-knowledge is the process of becoming dehypnotized. When you are hypnotized, you see things as they really are not, mistaking the false for the true. A self-deluding process is required. A robot imagination. Without imagination, man would not be man, yet it is the main obstacle to self-knowledge. The trouble begins when we allow imagination to use us, and this occurs whenever it draws images from the impressions in the memory. Then we suffer. And if we use our misery to observe ourselves, we discover that this type of imagination is the curse of man, the thing that separates us from God, if there is a God. Impressions in the memory are the cause of most of the pain and misery in your life and everyone else's. But the memory also contains facts. With impression, memory, man argues. With factual memory, he gets things done. The world progresses materially through the use of facts. From medicine to spaceships, every new device and practical service to mankind has its origin as a progressive development of factual memory. Man always uses it in his work or when there is something important to do. But as soon as he finishes work, he switches over to impression memory. This emotional memory is where he keeps his imaginings of the significance of experience, of what he is and what others are. Here he is no longer concerned with facts. He enters the world of imagination and opinions, the world of the false. And yet, when he has an important job to do, when he cannot afford to fail, he deals only in facts. Countless men and women have contributed in their own way to progress, but have contributed not one fact to answer the question, where am I going? What's it all about? Are the ones who came before you, your hypnotists? Are you in turn the hypnotist of your children? There is only one way to find out. You have to see yourself exactly as you are, not as you imagine you are. When you observe yourself, you must not condemn or approve what you see. If you tell a lie, there is no need to judge yourself. The judge cannot be the judged, and even to accept is to judge. The fact is that you lied. There is no need to tell anyone else, just face the truth alone. As you continue watching yourself, you will observe that you are an habitual liar. Even recounting a simple happening, you will observe yourself lie or exaggerate for no reason. If you try to find a reason, you are judging again, trying to justify. You will be amazed at what you see. The scientist, when he is observing the results of an experiment, is often amazed at what he sees. And he can laugh at it too, without changing the results. If you try to change what you see, you have failed again. To succeed in any endeavor, you have to keep coming back to your object. Your object is to see yourself exactly as you are. You are not just a liar, you are many other disagreeable things. If you try to change them all, you will not have time to know yourself or change yourself. And then you will be back with all the others before you who tried to change themselves, but never succeeded. If we could easily change things by opposing them, what a mess we would be in. What is good to some is bad to others. Some would change the good, others would change the bad. There is no escape from the old in the old, or we would all be free. Self-knowledge is the discovery of the new. It looks beyond the world that has all the answers and no solutions. You buy a diamond ring. It costs a lot of money, and for years, you wear it with the satisfaction that goes with owning something beautiful or valuable. One day an expert proves that it's a worthless imitation. Do you continue to wear it with the same pleasure? No. You discard it. You leave it in the drawer, or let your children play with it. The truth is that once you discover something is false, you lose interest in it. Man no longer treasures what he thought was genuine once he discovers it is false. In this way, truth is its own solution. Self-knowledge is the discovery of the false. You do not have to find what is true. When the false is discarded, truth is there. It always was. Just keep observing the fact and the change will come automatically and will be lasting. When you discover you are a liar and face the fact without excuses, you will begin to stop lying. Lying will drop away like a dead leaf that is no longer part of the tree. You are also a hypocrite. You are cruel, selfish, greedy, and envious. You do not live up to the standards of behavior and thought you profess and expect of others. You allow yourself the indulgence of anger, but condemn it in others. You will cheat in a business deal and excuse it as business. You will defame another man or woman to amuse yourself in conversation, and then go home and say you love. If that is love, there is no hope. Love, if it exists, must be constant and not the plaything of inconstancy. When the link between one fact and another is not apparent, remember that life is always moving and do not separate the part from the whole. Life is a stream sweeping you along, and the facts are like immovable rocks in the middle of the stream. Face each fact as it presents itself and rest. The stream will carry you around and beyond. Struggle away from the fact by not facing it, and you fight against the stream of life and suffer. It is the law. There is no other way. To face a fact is to look at it full on, no matter how ugly or painful it is. Then it dissolves, and like the smashed atom releases a tremendous energy which we apprehend as the moment of decision or the moment of truth. A man wants to find out what is in the valley over the hill. He climbs to the top of the ridge and looks. At first he sees only what is, as it is, the valley and all that is in it. He does not say the river at the north end should be at the south. He does not say what should be and what should not be. He looks. Then he has the desire to live there. But the desire is not the fact. It is only the path leading up to the fact. When he actually goes to live in the valley, the things he can change about it can be changed. But it is the fact that they are capable of being changed that changes them. The man is merely the instrument. If the water can be diverted, he will face the fact and do it. He does not have to judge anything as long as he keeps facing the facts. If the river is too far away to irrigate his fields, and it cannot be diverted, the man will have to face the fact, perhaps even weep with frustrated desire and go elsewhere. If he does not face the fact, and moves into the valley on the strength of his desire and its blind optimism, he will be living in imagination, dreamland with reality's agony, and life will become a lingering misery. The fact comes first. It is always that way. But this truth cannot be seen unless the mind is very still. In the beginning, you may only glimpse it. Why is it that most magazines devote the front page to a picture of a pretty girl, although she may not be connected with the contents? And why is she always smiling, looking happy or sexy? The answer may seem obvious to the robot mind, but that does not mean it is really understood. The device would not work if everyone saw through it. The fact is that the manufacturers and advertising men who deal in these things aim to create a desire for their products by planting the alluring impression in your mind that they are bringing you happiness. This works because real happiness is not known. If it was, even to suggest that a magazine could cause it would be ridiculous. It might make you laugh to be tickled with a feather, but that doesn't mean the feather causes happiness. And laughter is not the indicator of happiness, as we all know. People imagine happiness is associated with possessions, whether money, houses, cars, television sets, pretty girls, or handsome men. They never cease imagining this, even though in their own experience the happiness of possession inevitably wilts and droops. So the false is tolerated and believed, because the fact is not faced, and is therefore powerless to bring the new. Our object here is to discover what is false. By observation, we have discovered that imagination is false when it separates the part from the whole, and builds on only one aspect of a fact, an impression. So if you separate yourself from this imagining, you separate yourself from the false. When you identify with imagining, you identify with the false, and you are unconscious robot thinking. When you are identified with a state, you are that state. When your thinking is unreal, so are you. When you are angry, you are anger. You can never stop anger by decision. Anger is the same monster every time. You can never stop anger by decision. Anger is the same monster every time. Its energy is emotion, and emotion is the result of conflict. Conflict comes from robot imagining. and that is the result of trying to change what is without facing the fact. Anger, like all the other corrupting identities in you, has to be observed and understood, and then it disintegrates and never returns. You cannot be anger and the observer at the same time, but you can appear to be angry and still be the observer. It takes tremendous power to remain the observer under provocation. But anger, being false, cannot exist in the spotlight of intelligent observation. From the book, Knowing Yourself, The True and the False. To order this book of 30 lessons, click on the link in the description.